So Bernie Sanders has been getting very, very severely smeared recently, and most of the smears have been sort of general, predictable smears in the context of the 2020 primary. So stuff like Bernie's not really a Democrat, or Bernie's just another white dude, and that's not what we need right now, or Bernie's ideas aren't really unique anymore because they've become mainstreamed partially thanks to Bernie in the 2016 election. And now a lot of candidates have many of Bernie's ideas in 2020, or Bernie's divisive in the DNC, or Bernie handed the election to Trump in 2016. And we could talk about every single one of those comments, assertions, smears, attacks, call them what you want. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today. I want to talk specifically about Bernie Sanders getting smeared for obviously correct statements about Venezuela, which should not even be controversial, and they wouldn't be were it not for this enclave of the left called the Leninist left, or as I call it, the Leninist left. And before I get to these Venezuela comments from Bernie, let me remind you, the Leninist left back in 2016 also smeared Bernie over his position on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There was an event, I forget exactly when in the campaign it was, relatively early though, and Bernie was asked a question from the audience about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And Bernie said something pretty logical and not super controversial, which is we have to be doing something to help the Palestinians. We have to be doing something to improve the conditions for Palestinians that are living in the region. And we simultaneously have to remember that Israel also is allowed to defend itself. And you could disagree with exactly where the line should be drawn, but it is a very milquetoast, uncontroversial statement. And he was smeared as an Islamophobe. He was smeared as just another Jewish Israeli shill. The thinly veiled anti-Semitism came forward. But it's like, hold on a second, that was a completely rational statement. Why was Bernie smeared for that? So let's now get to Venezuela. I've been telling you for, a month or longer in this recent news cycle, but really for years, that progressives should not support Nicolas Maduro. Progressives should not support Hugo Chavez. Maduro is a disaster. He has plundered and distorted, and he is an authoritarian, and I'm a progressive. So I oppose him. But that doesn't mean that I'm in favor of American intervention in Venezuela. American intervention in Venezuela is something I'm against. Just over the weekend, I got emails from people saying, David, I can't believe you favor American intervention in Venezuela. And I rarely respond to people other than on the show, but I wrote back to a couple of people saying, can you point me to a video where I say I'm in favor of American intervention in Venezuela? Because I'm not. I'm against it. People on the right tend to disagree with me because they want the United States to get involved in Venezuela. People on the Leninist left disagree with me because they sometimes idolize Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro. So that's me, just to kind of set this up. In comes Bernie Sanders, and he tells us his view, and it's effectively identical to my view. And he's getting crushed for it. I mean, just absolutely obliterated by elements of the left on Twitter and on the internet. So let's first start with Bernie's tweets on January 24th about this issue. Bernie Sanders, the most progressive member of the U.S. Senate, said about the situation in Venezuela, quote, "The Maduro government has waged a violent crackdown on Venezuelan civil society. True. Violated the Constitution by dissolving the National Assembly. That's correct. And was reelected last year in an election many observers said was fraudulent. That's absolutely accurate. The economy is a disaster. That's correct. And millions are migrating. Absolutely correct. Estimated 10% of the Venezuelan population has left the country." Bernie goes on. "The United States should support the rule of law, fair elections, and self-determination for the Venezuelan people. That does not mean American involvement. We must condemn the use of violence against unarmed protesters. That's absolutely correct. And the suppression of dissent." And then Bernie goes on to finish by saying, "But, and this is important, we must learn the lessons of the past and not be in the business of regime change or supporting coups as we have in Chile, Guatemala, Brazil, and the Dominican Republic. The United States has a long history of inappropriately intervening in Latin American nations. We must not go down that road again. Absolutely and completely correct on every single level. Those tweets were not as noticed, maybe, as this next one that Bernie tweeted over this past weekend, where he added to his commentary on Venezuela, saying, "The people of Venezuela are enduring a serious humanitarian crisis." That's correct. Nicolas Maduro denies it, but they are. The Maduro government must put the needs of its people first, allow humanitarian aid into the country, and refrain from violence against protesters. Obviously, all correct. Now, before we even get into the analysis of the smears that Bernie is on the receiving end of as a result of these tweets, let me first just say I applaud Bernie for talking about this. Many 2020 candidates, Democratic candidates, have been avoiding talking about this. My guess is because they are worried that if they just speak their mind the way Bernie did, they will be called either socialists or they will be called in line with the Trump pro-intervention, pro-coup, get involved and take their oil side, which of course Bernie is not and I am not, and it shouldn't be so controversial merely to say this. Now, on the facts, Bernie's just right here. I mean, there's been a violent crackdown against Venezuelan civil society. There's an election that is widely alleged to have been fraudulent. There's suppression of dissent. We are against regime change if we are progressives. If we are progressives, there can be no way to be supportive of the Maduro regime, and we also should not be supportive of regime change. Now, on this program, I'm very careful not to make this a show about we're on the left, but we primarily criticize the left. I don't like that idea, okay? I criticize whoever deserves criticism. It's mostly the right, but sometimes it's the left. On this issue, a portion of the left is failing. There can't be left-wing apologetics for authoritarian regimes. It doesn't matter if they have socialistic rhetoric or capitalistic rhetoric or theocratic rhetoric. Progressives shouldn't do apologetics for authoritarian regimes. There are some Leninist leftists who championed Fidel Castro. No, I mean, just no. You can be against authoritarians and against U.S. intervention. I was not a supporter of Fidel Castro, but I was against the embargo on Cuba. These positions can be held simultaneously. You can be in favor of social democracy, but against so-called socialist authoritarian regimes, which are really authoritarian perversions, right? That's actually what they are in practice. And I'll actually go even further. You can argue in general about what type of aid is good for a country. Like if you're displeased with the type of aid that is being sent to Venezuela, you believe that instead of sending food, we're better off, or they will be better off, if we send the equipment and source materials for making their own food. I'm right there with you, right? We've been talking for years about how a lot of the types of aid that is sent around the world, humanitarian aid, free sneakers, for example, which gives people sneakers for a little bit, but it does nothing to help them build a footwear industry. And in the long term, it's of questionable value. That's a perfectly legitimate debate to have if that's your problem with the humanitarian aid that's being sent. But this is Bernie Sanders. This is not some wild neocon interventionist shill of the types that wanted to get us into the Iraq war and other interventions. So let's all think for a second. Let's calm down for a moment. I am thrilled that Bernie has stated his position, whatever it is. It just so happens that he is absolutely and exactly spot on with this position. Now, if you're going to write to me, let me throw out a disclaimer. If you're going to write to me and say, David, but your view doesn't align with that of, for example, Venezuelan-funded state media. You know what? You're right. My view is not going to be the same as media outlets that are funded by the Maduro regime. That's not going to be a shock. But you should also consider whether you believe that the equivalent of North Korean state television or Trump TV is where you believe you are getting the most precise and accurate description of what it is that's going on in Venezuela. Good for Bernie. If you disagree with the facts, let me know why. I'm on Twitter at @dpakman, and the show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show. We will take a quick break. Boy, is it a good program today on this Monday. Today's show is made possible in part by Sunbasket, giving everybody in our audience 60% off their first box. When you go to getsunbasket.com/Pakman, you'll get 6 dinners delivered to your door for just $28. Sunbasket is a meal kit service that brings fresh ingredients for ready-to-cook recipes to your home, but they are not like some of the other companies that you might have heard about, because what makes Sunbasket different is their commitment to sustainability, which I know is really important to lots of people in our audience. Organic ingredients, USDA certified, antibiotic, hormone-free meats, as well as an ability to accommodate just about any type of diet. If you are low carb, if you are gluten-free, if you are paleo, vegetarian, vegan, pescatarian, Mediterranean, Sunbasket has you covered. Or even if you're not sticking to a particular type of diet, Sunbasket has a lot of great plans to choose from. Just pick a meal plan, choose how many recipes you want per week. You can even choose which recipes you want before you get them so that you know you're getting meals you'll enjoy. And the list of recipes changes every week. You can also choose when the meals show up at your home, which is really useful for me in particular. You can even skip weeks if you need to. Everything that needs to stay cold stays cold. Everything stays totally fresh. All the ingredients are pre-measured, which makes everything really easy for you. And all of their packaging is recyclable and compostable, which I especially love. Start getting sustainable, delicious, healthy, organic meals sent right to your home and get a 60% discount off your first week of meals just by going to getsunbasket.com/Pakman. You'll get 6 dinners delivered to your door for just $28. I've put the link right underneath this video.